Huh? I don't get it. When I went out to a town I don't usually go to for shopping, I witnessed my husband and my mother intertwining their arms, walking amidst each other and kissing in public. I was so surprised that I ran up to them and confronted them, but instead of taking offense, they reopened the situation. I immediately went to my parents' house and told my father about them and divorced them, but then my father died and I met my mother and my ex-husband again. I hadn't seen my mother in a long time. She was wearing loose-fitting clothes and her belly was obviously swollen, and when she noticed my gaze, she smiled as if she had won me over. "Oh my, have you noticed? I have a child inside me. You couldn't seem to do it no matter how long you waited. Unlike you, she had a baby right away, now I can finally be a father. I'm glad I left you." The two of them launched into a tirade that hurt me as much as possible. However, their intentions were not met. Because, unfortunately, I wasn't harmed in any way. That's funny, you both look like idiots. I laughed while holding my stomach. My name is Oz and I am a 24-year-old office worker. My parents became parents at a very young age. It was what is known as a shotgun marriage. My mother met my father, who was 4 years older than her, and had me when she was 16 and still in high school. How did they meet? My mother fell in love with my father at first sight and made a strong move on him, and he was forced into a relationship with her. They got married shortly afterwards when she became pregnant with me. Apparently, people around her were vehemently opposed to her getting married in high school, saying it would be unpopular, but they had to admit it because my mother already had me in her belly. The young couple's marriage was apparently successful at first. When I was a kindergartner, my father used to pick me up when it was raining and he was off work. Oz's dad is so young and cool. Right? Daddy's so kind and I love him. I used to love going home with my father under the umbrella and talking about the day's events. However, an incident happened to my father, which led to a complete change in my mother's attitude towards him. While dismantling scaffolding at work, my father accidentally fell and was badly injured. When my father's body was crippled with bruises and complex fractures, it felt like my mother turned on him. Fortunately, he was not killed, but his body suffered permanent injuries and he was unable to continue working as a steeplejack. Thanks to rehabilitation, he managed to walk again and was able to find a new job with a company through his friend. However, he still needs long-term rehabilitation after being discharged from hospital. My mother refused to help my father with everything from hospital visits to daily care, saying that it was none of her business. When my father fell down in the corridor at home and was unable to move, she deliberately ignored him or spoke to him in a sarcastic manner. "You're so pathetic, falling down like this. Oh, it was a mistake to marry such a baggage. I should have looked at more men before I married him." My mother always complained about my father to me as a young girl. But I saw it as my mother picking on my father, and to be honest, I didn't like my mother. My father had to save his work to go to the hospital and we were not a well-off family. My mother had a night job, so I spent a lot of time with my father during the day, and I think I missed him more than my mother. My mother may have been aware of this, or perhaps she didn't like children that much from the start, but she only took care of me to the minimum and left me to grow up. I managed to get out of high school, but after graduation my mother told me to work to help the family finances, so I didn't go on to university, but instead got a job at a small local company. I'm sorry, Oz, but because of my body like this, I'm putting a lot of strain on you. Don't say that. I'll gladly work if it will help my father in any way. My father bowed his head apologetically to me as he tried to work instead of going on to higher education. I didn't want to obey my mother, but I still worked hard for my father's sake. Eventually, after a few years of employment and getting used to my job, I married Raymond, a coworker at my workplace. I wanted to create a warm family with him, not a cold marriage like my parents. I will take good care of Oz. Let's be happy together. I want lots of children. I was happy to hear those words and accepted his proposal easily. However, a year had passed since our marriage and there was no sign of any children between Raymond and me. I wanted children too, but no matter how long I waited, there was no sign of pregnancy. I was depressed and Raymond put pressure on me as if I was the only one to blame. Ha! Why can't you have a child? All my peers have children already. I'm sure there's something wrong with your body. You're a failure wife. Don't say that. It's not just my problem, I want you to go with me to the obstetrician and get checked out. Huh? Why do I have to go through all that trouble? I've always been healthy, I haven't caught a single cold. It must be your fault that we can't have children. When I suggested infertility treatment to my husband, who blamed only me, he would not listen to me at all. On the contrary, he cursed me for not being able to have children because of me. Stop making excuses and get yourself to a hospital. You're ruining my reputation if you can't have children after getting married. He would not listen to anything I said, and would only blame me one-sidedly. Even so, I was still alone in trying to conceive with a gleam of hope, but there was no sign of a child at all. Raymond gradually stopped coming home. He often came home in the morning, saying he was busy with work. I wonder if he is really at work. I think he may be having an affair. I remember that time. I had many reasons to suspect my husband. I once smelled a woman's perfume on his clothes when he came home in the morning. Not once, but several times. Furthermore, credit card statements showed that he regularly spent unaccounted for money, which further fueled my distrust. However, I was looking for an opportunity to talk to him, thinking that if I questioned him directly, I would get a blank answer, but the opportunity soon came. It was when I went to a town I don't usually go to for shopping. I saw my husband, who said he was working on his day off today. Was that Raymond? But I thought he was supposed to be working today. I was about to call out to him, but when I looked closer, I noticed a woman next to him. What? Why are my mother and Raymond walking together? My mother is walking next to my husband smiling. I have kept my distance from my mother ever since I got married. I sometimes went to my parents' house to see my father, but I rarely took my husband to my parents' house. I don't think my husband and my mother ever spoke to each other at all after the wedding ceremony. I wondered why, so I didn't speak to them and watch their movements, but to my surprise, they held hands in a friendly manner and eventually kissed in front of me, out of sight. What? I don't understand. I shouted. I was appalled, but they walked on, oblivious to my apprehension. Finally, I shouted out. Hey, Raymond. Mother. What are you doing? I couldn't help but chase after them and call them off, and they looked surprised at my appearance. Oh, what's wrong, Oz? You're so upset. It's not what's wrong, what are you two doing? What do you mean? I just happened to meet Raymond earlier, so I was just saying hello and saying it's been a long time. What's wrong with that? It seems that my mother is trying to get away with it. My mother, who I hadn't seen in a long time, was young and didn't look like she was in her 40s unless she told me. Then, as I approached her, I noticed something. I smelled this smell somewhere before. I remembered the smell of perfume from my mother, who was dressed young. It was the smell of my husband's clothes when he came home in the morning. I didn't want to admit it, but I was convinced that my mother was my husband's lover. Don't lie to me, I saw you and Raymond kissing earlier. What? What? We just bumped into each other. The two men looked impatient for a moment and blinked at each other when questioned, but after a moment of silence, Raymond opened his mouth as if he had given up. Oh, I didn't think that I'd be caught cheating this soon. Why are you here? What do you mean? I thought I could fake it a bit more because you're slow, but I didn't think you'd seen me. As you expect, I prefer older women. I'm sorry, Oz. I felt sorry for you, but from the first time I met him, Raymond was my favorite. My mother and my husband said unbelievable things in a brazen attitude. I happened to bump into Raymond a while ago and we had a nice chat over a cup of tea and things started to get good. I'm still young, so I want to have a romantic relationship. You and I had a bad marriage, and she listened to me, but the more we talked, the more I was attracted to Martha. I heard that you hadn't been pregnant for a long time, hadn't you? Raymond seems to want a boy, but because of you, it's a pity for him. I can't believe you said that to my mother. Because it's true. You can't have children because of something wrong with your body. Unbelievably, my husband seemed to tell my mother everything that was very private between us as a couple. I suffered alone because I couldn't have children and my husband didn't listen to me when I asked for advice, but now he says it's my fault, as if he were the victim. Anger welled up in me and I realized that there was no way I was going to stay married to this man. You are disgusting. Do you know what you are doing? I shouted at the two of them, who were repeating their excuses in a heated manner. It can't be helped, this is what happens because you're no good as a wife and a woman. Huh? I don't want a husband like you. I don't want you anymore. I want a divorce. I've had enough of you for a long time, to be honest. You're always making excuses, you're never going to have children, and I'm just glad to be rid of you, you defective piece of shit. Oh, I didn't mean to do that, but I guess I ended up taking away Oz's precious husband. My mother makes a verbal apology, even though she probably doesn't think it was a bad thing. If I tell your dad about this affair, he'll divorce you, too. You should be prepared for that. When I said this, my mother's color changed, but she soon returned to her former relaxed expression. Well, there's no evidence of adultery anyway. You and Raymond can get divorced if you want, but I'll get divorced when I want, so leave me alone. Come on, Raymond, let's go now. My mother urged Raymond to go, and the two of them left without me. Despite their obvious adulterous relationship, unlike Raymond, my mother did not seem to want to divorce my father immediately. I immediately went to my parents' house and told my father about my mother and the others. Well, even though she is such a woman, I have endured for many years thinking that Oz needs your mother. I never thought she would neglect her daughter in this way. My father said this to my report with an expression of bitterness on his face. Raymond and I are getting a divorce. I don't think we can stay a couple after what he did to us. What will Dad do about Mom? Don't worry, I have an idea. I won't let them get away with what they want. The divorce was finalized when Raymond unilaterally sent me a completed divorce form in the mail and I signed it. My mother has not returned to her parents' house since then, and apparently she and Raymond eloped together. Although I was angry, my father told me to leave those two alone and I decided to forget about my ex-husband and my mother. Later, I moved out of the flat I was living in with Raymond and went back to my parents' house. My father was able to move more than he used to be and was able to do most things for himself. Ironically, it seems that the fact that my mother did not assist him at all was effective. I'm glad to be able to live with Oz again, even though it's come to this. Thank you for coming back to us. I had a brief moment of peace with my father, but that life did not last long. He contracted an epidemic of pneumonia and suddenly found himself on the verge of death. I'm sorry for having forced you to endure for a long time. From now on, live your life the way you want to. Just before he died, he told me that while holding my hands in a hazy state. I nodded tearfully at my father's words, and then, without the benefit of medical treatment, his condition suddenly changed and he passed away. I couldn't believe that he died so suddenly. I should have been more filial to him. While I was making preparations for my father's funeral, an unexpected person came to our house. Long time no see, I heard he died? My mother and my ex-husband Raymond were beside her. The two men came into the house with a nasty smile on their faces. What are you doing now? Go home. What? Who do you think you are? I'm married to him, remember? When a husband dies, it's natural for the wife to come running. How can you say such a thing when you eloped and lost touch with him for years? Yes, yes. You can say whatever you like. But no matter how much you cry, I'm his dead wife. That means I'm entitled to a share of the property. He had insurance, didn't you? I'm appalled. That's why you didn't divorce my dad. After retiring from the construction industry due to an injury, my father worked hard at what he could do at the company he rejoined, and just before he passed away he was in a certain position. Although he had no academic background, he was a craftsman, but he had developed a lot of spirit during his career. Many of his coworkers loved my father, who took good care of them. It was worth not getting a divorce, she says. Now let's talk about property division. I know he didn't have much material desire, so he had been saving up. Come on. My mother edged in on me. Looking at my mother, I suddenly realized something. My mother, dressed in loose-fitting clothes, her belly clearly bulging. When she noticed my gaze, she smiled as if triumphant. Oh, you noticed? Yes, I have Raymond's child in my belly. It seems Oz couldn't do it no matter how long she waited, but I'll give birth to it for you. Unlike you, she had a child right away. I'm really glad I left you. The two of them hurled out expletives that hurt me to the maximum extent possible. However, their intentions were not met. Unfortunately, I wasn't harmed in any way. Ha ha ha, oh, that's funny, you both look like idiots. I laughed while holding my stomach. They looked at me like that with a puzzled look on their faces. Hey, what's so funny? It's funny, after all. I'm sorry to say this, but is that boy really Raymond's? What? Raymond replied to me in a bad mood. However, the mother's appearance suddenly became strange. Her eyes were shifty and she seemed clearly upset. But Raymond doesn't seem to notice it. Of course he's mine, don't say random things just because you're frustrated. Yes, it is. Don't be a sore loser. Well, you'll know if I'm a sore loser when you see this. I left, picked up a document I had been keeping and held it in front of them. What, suddenly? What? Here. Why are you so surprised? It's not that big a deal anyway, ha. What's this all about? The two were astonished to see what was written on the document. The document was an investigative report from a credit agency that had compiled information on my mother's friendships. Sometime after my mother eloped with Raymond, I happened to see her on the street. However, the man beside her was not Raymond, but a young man whom I did not know at all. I secretly followed her and they went into a hotel. What do you mean, maybe my mother was? I consulted my father before he died and decided to investigate my mother's background. I thought this might be useful in the future. The investigation by the agency reported that my mother was in a deep relationship with a man who was not Raymond after all. Raymond frantically reads the documents with an expression of disbelief. The report contains detailed information about my mother and her boyfriend. After reading the entire report, Raymond glared at my mother, who was standing beside him. What does this report mean? Oh, you've been cheating on me. Of course not. Oz is lying. The child in my belly is definitely yours. The mother scowled, but insisted that the child in her stomach was only Raymond's. Who do you believe, this girl or me? Yes, that's true too. She's a ridiculous woman who wants to set up her mother because she couldn't have a child herself. Raymond seemed to have regained his composure after being talked down by my mother. Then, having determined that the report was a lie, they put their issue on the back burner and began to blame me. It depends on you whether you believe me or not, but I'm sorry, we have conclusive evidence. You can come in. I called out to the room next to the living room where I was now. The door then opens and one man enters. Who's that? Who's that guy? Who? I don't know him either. They both tilt their heads at the appearance of a man they don't recognize. This man is my husband. You don't know him, of course, but I remarried. His name is Marty. A year after I divorced Raymond, I remarried him, whom I met through a friend. What proof could this man possibly have to prove? Unlike your mother, it doesn't look like it yet, but I actually have a baby in my belly. Of course it's his child. What about it? Speak up. You still don't know? When I was married to you, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't have a baby, but after I married him, Marty, I had a baby right away. Raymond's eyes widened as he realized the intent of my words. You didn't go to the hospital because you thought it would be too much trouble, but I did a proper examination and I know that there is nothing wrong with my fertility. So our inability to have a baby was your problem. Oh, no. It's not true. But it's funny, it's supposed to be hard to have a baby, but you're pregnant. Is it really your child? When I asked that, Raymond stared at Martha next to him, unable to refute the question. Oh. Hey, tell me honestly. All right. I lost. Oh, you admitted it so quickly. I thought you'd be more coy. It's just a game with Raymond anyway. Hey. What do you mean? I was dating you because you were Oz's husband. You see, you want to have someone else's. But my true love is my other boyfriend. I was going to break up with you after a while. Raymond is shocked and stunned by my mother's words. I was going to enjoy playing with men until they found out, but now I've been interrupted. Well, it doesn't matter whose child I'm carrying. It doesn't change my right to that man's inheritance. Are you still talking like that? I'm sorry, but you'll have to give that up. Well, how many times do you want me to say the same thing? I'm not divorced from my dead husband, remember? I have a right to my inheritance. I'm telling you, you have no right. Because you and my dad got divorced a long time ago. What? No, of course not. Maybe you're too old to remember, but your father had your mother's completed divorce papers. When I reported my mother's infidelity to my father, he actually pulled out a divorce decree. According to my father, when my mother and my father had a big fight a long time ago when my father was unable to work due to an injury, my mother had confronted him with the completed divorce papers, saying that she didn't want a husband who couldn't move. In the end, he kept it without filing it because I was there, but before he died, my father used the divorce papers to divorce my mother. He used the divorce papers to divorce my mother before he died. Do you understand now? Oh, no. My mother, who had been relaxed until a moment ago, turned pale at my words. Raymond is still glaring at her. I'm leaving. When she realized that Raymond had found out about her affair and that she would not receive any more money, she ran out of the house as if to escape. The mother later gave birth to a baby boy, but without a DNA test, it was clear from the blood type that the child was not Raymond's. Raymond said, "I didn't know you were such a whore," and abandoned my mother after she lost her property and disappeared. And the man she had an affair with, who was her true love, was originally just a playmate with her and ran away when he found out she was pregnant. In the end, my mother became a single mother with a young child at the age of 40. She has no one to rely on and is raising the child of the man who abandoned her with the support of the state. I once saw my mother with her child from a distance, but she looked more like a grandmother than a mother with her gray hair. On the other hand, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl and now we are living happily as a family of 3. When I think about it, the child my mother gave birth to is my younger brother, who is a classmate of my daughter, so it's quite complicated. On the anniversary of my father's death, the 3 of us are going to visit his grave. The betrayal of my ex-husband and mother was painful, but it also gave me an irreplaceable family. I am sure you are watching over us from heaven. I am sure that my Father in heaven is also happy about the birth of his granddaughter. With the love and affection he has given me in my heart, I vow to continue to get on well with my family.